We are recording in Shavua Tov. It's Jason Caplan with Ephraim Wenger
Shavua
on
Tov.
Shavua
Shavua Tov.
Tov. How are you in Yerushalayim?
It's very hot here in Yerushalayim. We actually hit one of the hottest temperatures in 818 years.
Is that right? I
So,
didn't read that on
yep,
the news.
that is right. And
Whoa.
it's pretty hot here. It's pretty hot here, yeah. But thank God for air conditioning.
Oh my gosh. I keep seeing his name on Facebook and I forgot his name. They keep saying, thank this man for air conditioning. I forgot his name now. I'll have to look it up. Um, our
Yeah,
weather's cooling down in Memphis. Usually it's pretty hot even now, but it's cooling down over here.
cool.
Okay.
Yes.
We
So
have
we
Sefer
ended off last week.
What's that?
We ended off last week Mishnah Dalet,
Yeah.
fourth Mishnah.
Dalit, yeah. So we're doing Dalit Hay.
So now we'll start with hey. That's where
Yeah, I
we
think
are.
you'll read the Hebrew and I'll read the English. And we have some really interesting things this week about safah, sufah, soph, all the
Yeah,
meanings.
we have a lot of interesting stuff here for sure.
And I've got a
Um,
surprise that we discussed before filming of a parallel with another spiritual tradition, which will show.
that is in itself is going to be very interesting.
I think everyone
But
was just about to turn off this video and now they're staying with us.
fantastic. Let's dive straight into it. Let's dive
Let's go.
straight into it. I'll go ahead. I'll read the Hebrew of Mishnah
Yeah.
Hey.
So I've got
Fifth
the Aryeh
Mishnah.
Kaplan here. You're gonna have the Aryeh Kaplan soon.
I will. Very excited. I also will have Rabbi Abulafia's Pirush very soon.
That is the new news. I forgot you told me that. So you have
So
the Perush.
that's right. I ordered Rabbi Avram Abulafia's Pirush for Sefer Yetzirah. Apparently, it's also a very rare book. I ordered it here in Israel and it should be arriving any day now.
Okay. On my next trip, I'm gonna
So
ask you to order another copy and I'll pick it up from you.
yeah, so so that's also very exciting. We'll hopefully be able to learn from that as well by next week.
Oh, awesome. That'll add a lot. Very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Okay. משנה ה'
Mishnah.
10 ספירות בלימה, מידתן 10 שאין להם סוף, עומק ראשית ועומק אחרית, עומק טוב ועומק רע, עומק רום ועומק תחת, עומק מזרח ועומק מערב, עומק צפון ועומק דרום. אדון יחיד אל מלך נאמן מושל בכולם, ממעון קודשו עד עדי עד.
Yeah. So Omek for everybody at home means depth. So that's going to be the repeated word.
Yeah,
And it says 10 spirit of nothingness. Their measure is 10, which have no end. A depth of beginning, a depth of end, a depth of good, a depth of evil, a depth of above, a depth of below, a depth of east, a depth of west, a depth of north, and a depth of south. The singular master, God, the faithful king, dominates over all of them from his holy dwelling until eternity of eternities. That's a lot.
yeah. So what I'm understanding here, it seems like Sefer Yetzirah is kind of breaking down the five dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the first two dimensions is talking about dimension of time, Elem Sof, Omek Rashid, Omek Achid, beginning and end, right? That's defining
Time.
a dimension of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is a moral dimension, good and evil, good and bad. Omek Tov, Omek Ra. Um, and then it seems like it's describing three-dimensional spaces, height, width, and length.
Oh,
So
nice.
omek rum v'omek tachat, right? So that would be height. Omek mizrach, sorry, that would be length. Omek
Length.
rum v'omek tachat.
Yeah.
Omek mizrach v'omek marav, east and west. That would be width, right?
Mm-hmm.
The width dimensional space. And omek tzafon v'omek damon, that would be the height space, dimensional space.
Perfect.
Then the last pasuk, Adon Yachid El Melech Neman Moshe B'Kulam, right? So what I'm understanding here, and I think Sefer Yetzirah does this repetitively, is where it speaks about the spirot, right? It starts with like the spirot. Esel spirot b'limad is 10 spirot,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're infinite, and this is how they show up in the world, or this is how they manifest in reality, and it breaks it down into like these dual structures with good and evil and beginning and end. which form these dimensional spaces. But then the last pasuk, it's like, but there's one God. Like, don't get confused, right? Like,
Yes.
it's formed. The sfirot might be dual structured in some sort of way, and they might manifest into reality in some sort of way. But Adon Yachid and Melech Ne'eman, Moshe B'Kulam. So like, but there's a God that is beyond the sfirot. That's what it says here, Moshe B'Kulam. It's beyond the sfirot. It's beyond these dimensions, and it's one unit. So I feel like, and it kind of like, right, the previous Mishnah, they also kind of made sure we don't get confused. Right, it says that it's 10, not 9, 10, not 11, and it's really trying to make sure we don't get confused here.
I think that's it. I think you say that really well, that there's some guardrails. So
Yeah,
each time we talk about Sefirot and their depth and how they work, remember there's one singular faithful king. And sometimes that's been the criticism from different thinkers about, I think especially
right,
from Yemen, I think the rabbis of Yemen were really concerned that people were focusing on Sefirot um, and I think, I'm trying to think of who wrote several times. I think we might have talked about it to say that you have to, it was Reb Chaim of Volozhin emphasized many times that you have to focus in prayer on God, even no matter how much you study with the Sefirot.
right.
We also talk about
Yeah,
five being opposite each other. We talked about that last week. The five fingers, if you put the Sefirot on five fingers and then put the other five on. So that goes really well with what you're saying.
how so?
Just because you're saying that there's the depth and width and then the different areas. And then, we have the left side and the right side. So there's always two opposing forces. So if you have five on this side and maybe there's another section of, length, width, and time that you can think of in a different opposite way on the other side, but that you can break it into fives, fits into the 10 sefirot.
Right.
It's a little bit of what Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan saying here, that the 10 sefirot consist of five sets of opposites. And these are parallel to the opposite five discussed in Mishnah Gimel. And then we talked about the opposite parallel of the five fingers of the two hands.
Right. Yeah, so that's really I think this duality that we spoke about last time. It's like, it says God created everything with, Zelu Matze bara Elohim, right? He always created, like, it's everything is mirrored. So like if there's five, there's another five that's mirrored. Like there's this duality of everything in existence except for God itself, right? So that's like
That's what we have to keep.
that's the emphasis here.
So what were you saying? And I forgot what the single letters were that we would try to remember them, because we broke everything down, the 22 letters, into
Right. So there's three yesodot, which is emesh, aleph, mem, shin. Sheva kfulot, 7 doubles. So that's beged kaporet, bed gibel daled.
Beged kaporet.
Right. That's the 7 doubles, right? And then you have what's called the 12 pshutot, the simples. So all the rest of the letters. So we got the foundations, aleph, mem, and shin. And those 3 foundations represent the foundation forces in nature. So aleph is wind, a spirit. Mem is mayim, is water, and shin is esh, fire. And then we have the 7 doubles. Those are the letters that have how do you say it in English? They could be written in
like a final nun, a final.
Right, that too, or with a dot, without a dot.
Yes, right.
Bet, so that's bet gimel daled and chaf pei resh taf, and each letter has its own unique,
Yeah, I saw a diagram where they took the 5 against the 5 in Sefirot and then put the letters inside of it, almost like the letters interact. We've seen it too in the different paths that the Sefirot take. The 22 fit in there.
Interesting.
The math is quite amazing.
Nice. I think anything else Caplan, Aryeh Kaplan adds in there for Mishnah Hey?
No, just that the word for dominate is moshel. Let me see, where did we read the word moshel? Did you say that right at the end? Moshel.
Yeah, moshel is at the end of the pasuk, right?
So the melech is a king who interacts with the subjects and is therefore affected by them. So I guess a king could be changed by his subjects, whether they listen or not, or if they follow him. But The Sefer says Moshe is like a dictator who rules, is not influenced by his subordinates.
Hmm.
So sometimes God is called a melech. We interact with maybe the sefirot, but the infinite being itself is an absolute ruler. It's not effective. It's that interesting debate on prayer. Does prayer change God's mind, or maybe does it change the sefirot, or maybe
Hmm.
prayer is for us? And I've never come
Yeah.
to a definitive answer on that, but I think
Well,
it.
now that I'm looking at this Mishnah, actually, he's describing 4 different names here. So Adon, that's one name.
Oh, that's
Master.
true. All right.
El, that's another name. And then Melech, king, another name. And then Moshel. What was Moshel? Dictator?
Or dominates. Yeah, exactly.
Dominate.
Yeah.
Well, Moshel, I guess Moshel is not wouldn't be a name to define God. It would be an action.
It
It would
seems
be an
more like
act.
a verb. It seems more like a verb.
Yeah.
But he
So really
uses it
3
one
names.
time as a noun. He says Moshe is a dictator. So maybe it kind of could hint at a noun.
Well, but the way it's phrased here in Hebrew, it says Moshel Bekulam, right? He rules everything. So
Yeah.
it's not described here as the definition of God is describing an action that he's taking.
Right. Maybe it's the melech can act as a total ruler, right? Without
Yeah.
being affected by the subjects. That's a very good point.
Even though what I believe it's referring to when it says total ruler, it's referring to the Sfirot. Because we just spoke about the Sfirot, and then it says, and God rules all the Sfirot. That's my understanding here.
Okay, so yeah, so God ruling the Sefirot. Is that what you mean?
I think that's what it means here. That's what I understand here. There's no reference to any subjects
I
other
think
than the
that,
Sfirot at this point.
right. Well, it goes back to him being the singular master, that he rules the Sefirot. So don't think that Sefirot itself is something that you would pray to or
Right,
give.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay, very good. And then
I mean,
Rabbi Caplan also points out that ma'on is a habitation, and it's a little bit different than makom. It's
hmm,
it's it's closely related, but it's just a little bit different because makom is kom, meaning to stand, and ma'on comes from ona, meaning time or period, which fits in nicely with what you were saying about that we're describing time.
the dimensions, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Mimon. Okay, that's interesting.
Okay.
That does fit well, yeah.
And then there's a little bit about Ade Ad. It's a famous piece in our davening and other places. And that Hashem lives in this timeless domain, but he creates the order of time.
Right. Even though he's beyond it, he created it and
Mm-hmm.
controls it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like we said, I think in the beginning, it really is trying to give over this idea where it's not, it's not abstract. It's not disconnected from God in any way, even though, in theory, we might say he's beyond it. But we also say, it's known in Chassidut, it's Sovev Kol Almin, Memaleh Kol Almin,
Mm-hmm.
right? He surrounds everything and he's within everything. And there are many theories where nature has its own structure and it really works on its own by itself. And I think over here is trying to emphasize that no, like even though God is technically beyond it, he's also within it.
That's very good. That's a very good parallel to the Hasidic Soviv Kol Amim and then Mamale, right? Aren't those two?
Molecular, yeah.
Excellent.
I mean, that phrase is a Kabbalistic phrase from the Zohar, but it's definitely used in Chassidut a lot.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Let's do Mishnah Vav.
Mishnah Vav, let's go. I'll hit the Hebrew and
I'll take the
you
English.
will follow English. Okay, Mishnah Vav, 10 ספירות בלימה. צפייתן כמראה הבזק, ותכליתן אין להם קץ. ודיברו בהן ברצו ושוב, ולמאמרו כסופה, ירדופו ולפני כיסו הם משתחווים.
Yes.
English.
And in English, 10 spirit of nothingness, their vision is like the appearance of lightning. Their limit has no end, and his word in them is running and returning. They rush to his saying like a whirlwind, and before his throne they prostrate themselves. This is probably my favorite Mishnah up to now because I really got so much out of the commentary, and it makes so much sense in terms of reading Yechezkel and understanding that better.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. Do you have some thoughts on this?
I do, but why don't you go ahead? I think it's very interesting, the whole sufah and
Yeah. All right,
that
we talked
whole
about
that
that
whole
before we
concept.
started. I love that idea that so sof means ending, and we say Hashem is Ein Sof, without end. But
Right.
there's some other, I guess, derivatives or other types of words that go with it, such as safah, which means to cease to exist, and sufah, which is whirlwind, which that goes back to Yechezkel, that there was this lightning and flashing and things coming out of this whirlwind. So, summarizing what Rabbi Caplan is saying here on Sefer Yetzirah is that at the beginning of the mystical experience, there's this kind of whirlwind, and then the individual soul, you lose that sense of existing on your own. You start to see where your real true source is,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not that spirituality is this pleasant thing all the time and just positive and there's a lot of light. I mean, I think it's popular to talk like that, but I think it's really true that a lot of the spiritual experience and doing spiritual work has a lot of whirlwind feeling to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then inside the whirlwind is, if you keep going, is the closeness to Hashem. Um, and then the idea of running and returning is like Rabbi Akiva, he left in peace and returned in peace. Always remember that if you're trying to come close to Hashem, make sure to go back and take a step back and calm
Right.
down a little bit, not get too involved.
Right.
So he says running is Chachma consciousness and returning is the Bina.
Mm. Interesting. So I'm just I'm bringing up here Yechezkel to see where is it mentioned. It mentions, all right, רוח סערה באה מן הצפון ויש מתלקחת מאוד סביב. Right. So the idea of sufah is, which is, what's the literal translation to English of sufah? That would be
I would actually
chaos.
read that to you, though. I'm really glad you brought up Yechezkel because Rabbi Kaplan says there are two types of storm winds, Sarah and Sufa. So Sarah is
Right.
what shows up in Yechezkel, and that's a type of a wind that agitates, that kind of blows things around. But Sufa is really the hurricane.
Mm.
So I don't know if Sufa shows up in Yechezkel as I originally thought. I'm seeing it now that it. Oh, Sufa is in Yeshayahu. It's in Yeshayahu. His chariot
Okay.
Merkava is like a whirlwind. That's the connection. And
Mm.
Yechezkel is Sa'ara. Okay, good. Good to see.
Yechezkel Sarah. Okay. Well, I like that. I like that. The mystical experience or the beginning of a mystical journey is not so much, I mean, as if many people describe it as beautiful lights and I don't know what, like this. It really, a lot of times it could start in chaos, like you say. It could start in this sufah, in this chaotic experience, trying to discover something new about yourself, or I mean, so sufah is Yeshayahu, he says, mentions there, sufah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like, just like you said, trying to get to the next level or confront something in yourself or some block that you have is not going to always be pleasant. And
Right.
it takes a lot of honesty and then move forward with it. So I was really interested in this. I think I started studying this particular mission about a month ago, and I wrote some music called Sufah and Safah because I was playing the music in a way that I played any note that came to mind, like a whirlwind, just anything just came out, just flying out like a whirlwind. And then I did feel like the music calms down after you do that and starts to organize itself. So I really think it's a really interesting, not interesting, it's a real powerful insight about Sufa and Safa.
Yeah, it is for sure, especially that we're speaking a lot over here. It seems to be, we're speaking a lot about structure. The sfirot, how they behave in a specific way, in this structured way. And like the idea of the sufah is the exact opposite. Is the idea of chaos, or this chaotic experience, which leads to structure, or which
Yeah.
leads to like a more, so like it's like, let's say with the music, you're trying to achieve a specific experience of creating a melody, or I don't know, a musical experience.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, obviously, the traditional way of doing it is with the structured notes that you put together in order to create the melody you want to create. And now what you're saying is like, what if we do it backwards? Like, what if, or even what Sefer Yetzirah is saying here with the sufah, is probably there's a lot of times we could start with the unstructured way. If it's with music, just letting your mind go with whatever notes come to mind first, with this, in a sense, in chaotic way, but that actually leads to like a beautiful melody in itself.
That's it. Very well said. I think that's
Yeah,
it.
so it's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's similar to jumping into the creative pool and swimming for a while and then starting to bring up the exact things that you want, but first starting unformed. And I wouldn't have thought Jewish meditation would have that piece in it until I read this, that it's okay to feel that. I would think, and I don't want to say I don't want to share personal experiences, but I think that there's times when people have what they think is a negative spiritual experience, but it's really, what if just someone just said, no, that's just the sufah part of meditation. Don't panic.
Right. It's part of it, right?
Part of it, that's normal. It's not all just relaxing peacefulness.
Right. And
And
if we could find the beauty in it as well, that
there's
would make it
beauty in
even
it.
more
Sit with
powerful.
it. Yeah, I think that's what's so powerful about these Nevi'im saying that this was happening to them was it happens to the greatest Nevi'im that there's this sense of chaos or whirlwind or, I think Rav Kook talks about the dark night of the soul, that there's times where you just feel very constricted. I think Rabbi Nachman talks about constricted consciousness. What does he call it? Kadnut? Have you heard that? Kadnut? Does that mean constricted? We'll have to look that up for next week.
Nachman speaks a lot about, in matter of the dark side of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
He has a few definitions. I mean, Chalal Panui is one of them, the empty space. He has, the term Lev Nishbar is like a broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. Lev Nishbar, maybe.
I'm going to look it up. I know it's called like Kadnut, which means your consciousness is restricted. You really can't see things very well. You feel very closed off. And I'll try and find it. But it's good that you pointed out the other two of that sort of simsun, that like feeling like you're in emptiness, that empty space.
Yeah, right. There's that too.
I just got. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's just a very interesting Mishnah. You're right. Like, it's just it's different than the previous ones, because the previous ones, like I said, they really seem to try to form some sort of structure or behavior.
Mm-hmm.
With the sfirot, and this one kind of like tells you, it starts off with saying Esel sfirot, the 10 sfirot, matzfiatam, how the way they appear, I guess, is kemereh bazak, like as a flash of lightning.
Right.
And then that's a very different appearance as to how it described before. Before it described like there's good and there's bad, there's the height and there's the width and there's the length and there's the deepness, and it's all this very, and suddenly now it gives you like, no, this, now the way they appear in the world, it's like a flash of lightning. And their essence, it's infinite. And
That's a good comparison.
Yeah, also this idea of the sfirot or appear as a flash of lightning, that also comes from Yechezkel, right? Yechezkel pasuk, if I'm not mistaken, it's pasuk Yudaled, it might be. Yeah.
The Chashmal, right? Is that referring to?
I think it's one after the Chasmal where it says the Chayot Ratzov Hashov Kemareh Bazak. So the living creatures are running and returning as a flash of lightning.
Wow.
This is the vision that he saw, right? Yechezkel, right? He saw vision, and as part of this whole sophisticated vision, he saw what's called the Merkava. How would you say that in English? He saw the
chariot.
The what?
The chariot, the Merkava.
The Merkava, and around it he saw these four, living creatures, and the way he described their movement was running and returning as a flash of lightning. So Sefer Yetzirah is saying the same thing about the Sfirot. V'dibur bahen b'ratzov hashov, running and returning.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, they're dynamic. They're moving all the time. They're not static.
That's, I think, a really good point, that there's a elasticity, or it's always in motion. You can't hold spirituality and you can't bottle it, and it's always in motion.
So this resembles also, there's a concept, and I'm no physician, but in quantum physics, and maybe Ari Caplan brings that in because he's a physician.
A physicist.
Right? Physicist. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Physicist. Physikai.
Physikai.
There's a concept called particle wave duality. Again, I'm not too familiar with quantum physics, but for what I do remember, particle wave duality is this concept. It's this concept where every particle is also a wave, and in other words, it could be in two places at the same time, and you can't really measure a particle in matter of its space or location. But what you could measure its probability of existing in a specific place at the same time. In other words, they're always in a movement of a running and
Right.
returning movement.
Right.
The particles.
Very good
In quantum
parallel.
physics.
Well, I think they show it in a diagram for us lay people that there's a space, and they say the particle could be here, but we can't pinpoint it.
We can't pinpoint it, right? You measure the probability of it being here at that specific time, but really, it seems to be on a wave, basically, on this movement of back and forth, or forth and back, and that seems to be this idea of this idea of how do you say in English, running and returning.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is, by the way, like running and returning is a concept that we see all throughout like Kabbalistic writings, but we could also take it to our own structure of ourself and understand also in a meditative way this running and returning, like you said in the beginning, where you got to know how to run into this mystical experience, but you got to know also how to leave it. And I think that's a powerful concept, because a lot of times when we have this feeling of running into something, we don't really think that we need to leave it. Like we want to just stay there. And this whole, what it's trying to tell us is that, no, don't be static. You don't want to stay in one place. You got to know how to enter this experience or whatever, enter this galactis, but also know how to leave it. Like you said with Rabbi Akiva, which you mentioned.
I think that's it, because I think that if you have this sufah in this whirlwind, you think, oh, this world's crazy, and then you have this spiritual mystical experience, you think, I don't think I want to go back. I think that was probably, Ben Azai or Ben Zoma, I can't remember.
Right.
One went crazy, one died, but I think both of them thought the physical world is really not worth going back to, especially if you're living during the Roman times. I probably wouldn't want to come back. So, but
I think you could, I think we could take that also, not only to the mystical world, like in matter of like other worlds and stuff like that. We could also take it just to, a lot of times we want this ecstatic experience, in our mystical experience. And I think we also need to know how to enter that, but also leave it, not to always stay at the static. Like it's really the balance between, you mentioned Rabbi Saadia Gaon, that you have the book. It's really the balance between, if it's, you could see this balance in everything. It's like between the rational and the what is it? Mystical, right? Entering the mystical, but then going back to the rational. This also takes me to one of Rabbi Nachman's pieces, in Likutei Moharan, in Likutei Moharan Kaf Daled, where he writes about this idea of running and returning, and he writes about how, like, you can't grasp infinity, like you can't grasp what's called like the infinite light, right? All himself. And this is typical of Rabbi Nachman. Like he opens his piece, he's saying you cannot grasp it, and then a few sentences later he's like, but you could grasp it. And this is how you could grasp it.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, you can't really grasp it, but this is how you could grasp it. You could grasp infinite light by a movement called mate velo mate, which is a literal translation would be like touching and not touching. And that's like that's a very similar concept to running and returning. And he says the way you achieve this movement and trying to grasp this infinite light, he defines it through happiness. And you have to do everything you do in this world through this feeling of happiness, and then you'll be able to grasp this infinity in this back and forth type of movement.
Oh, that's very good. In fact, I was going to say that along those same lines, you're saying that Saadia Gaon, Rabbi Caplan quotes Saadia Gaon, very similar thing about touching, not touching, or like he says that Saadia Gaon says that sufah is denoting a dust devil that one sees in small whirlwinds, where the dust assumes many shapes and forms. So listen to this. These forms constantly change, and the distinct form lasts only for a moment, very much like the quantum physics you're referring to. So similarly, when one visualizes the Sefirot, one can see them in many forms, but like sand devils, they only last for an instant and then dissolve. Very cool. So I just read that just now. I didn't know that he quoted Saadia Gaon there. Perfect.
Nice.
But I think Rabbi Nachman would bring in the idea that you need the happiness and joy to be able to accomplish that. That's where I think Rabbi Nachman is very unique in saying how important joy is in the mystical.
Right. Yeah, and I think the reason he's saying that is because, he's trying to understand, well, like we're finite, we're limited, and how could we grasp, right, the infinite? Like if we're limited, if we're finite. So then I think he's like, well, let's use this specific energy called happiness, and this happiness energy, he puts it in the infinite type of power. So he's like, well, if we do everything we're doing in this world, in a limited sense, but if we use this energy called happiness to do it, then we could grasp the infinite in this like back and forth vision.
Very good.
You can't be statically there, but you can somehow grasp it.
Well, I think that's very good because I think simcha has to be not a result, but an action. So I think people are
Right.
saying,
It's a constant action.
Yeah, it's something you put into your action. And I was thinking the other day that simcha gedola liot the simcha.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking that like mitzvah gedola lihiot, I would put a comma there. If you really know how to be, if you really know who you are, then you could be simcha tamid. Like if you get to this essence of who you are without the external pressures. I think especially in Judaism, especially observant Judaism, we all as a community follow a lot of laws and minhagim together. So it puts a lot of pressure on us and also a really good challenge to find out who we are individually without all that communal action. So I think if you can mitzvah gedola, if you can really be yourself amongst the community, you could be simcha tamid.
And yeah, I like that lihiyot. Yeah, it's an emphasis on the being.
On the being, yeah. Like I was thinking to myself, if you put the comma there on the lihiyot and made that the major focus, then your result would be simcha tamid.
That's good. I like that.
Like that, yeah. So
I'm going to use that with your permission.
Just quote Rabbi Caplan.
That's a good application.
Lahavdil. Okay. So we had one thing that we talked about before starting. I wanted to share this picture.
Oh yeah.
I found this today on studying a book on Taoism. Look at this diagram. It's fascinating how close it is to the Kabbalistic tree and some of the language used on this picture. I just wanted to quote where it's from because I meant to this. It's Solala Towler. He's the author of Practicing Tao Te Ching. So it's Taoism, Tao Te Ching, okay? And great book if anyone wants to pick it up. But, essentially at the beginning it says that there's this Wuji, forgive my Chinese, I don't know Chinese, but just reading the English, the original primordial state of being. That's the top circle. There's your Orient Sof. Breaks down to yin yang, which to me is Chachma and Bina, and then you have these, looks like Sphira to me, and Malchut at the bottom, where the 10,000 beings, all life in the manifest realm. I mean, that's pretty close.
Yeah, and there seem to be 10 of them, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I didn't count. Very good point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Is this little one here at the?
Oh yeah, that would be a 10. That'd be a 10. You got it.
That'd be a 10, right?
That'd be a 10, definitely.
So they include the infinite, the 10th.
They do. And they also talk about something that you mentioned in a different class about wood, fire, earth, metal, gold. These elements. Like
foundations. Right. Yeah.
Foundation, like Amash.
And the yin and the yang, right? The dualism, the duality of what is it? What does it say here? Where yin and yang further transformed into the 5 basic elements of life.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of parallels. It really is, to me, like a lot of confirmation that if you looked at different cultures, and this being the Chinese culture with Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, and comes to some similar conclusions, half a world away.
Earth, metal, gold, water. That's interesting because I think also in the Sefirot we see in Judaism is where we have the 3 foundations, right? The Aleph, Mem, and Shin, which are the wind and wind, water, and fire, which are also they transform. So like Shin on the top transforms Chokhmah and Binah. It's really the yin and yang of Chokhmah and Binah.
Yes.
Transforms into inflation of fire, and it's similar to what it says here. It says like the yin and yang transform into the 5 basic elements of life. And I think you see a similarity in the behavior of the Sefirot, where they transform these. Well, at least 6 of them transform the 3 foundations. So the Chokhmah and Binah, then you have the Chesed and Gvura, which is the Aleph, and then Hod and Yesod, which is the Mem, the water.
Perfect. I mean, that's a lot of parallels for being half a world away.
Yeah.
That is pretty cool. So I thought that was really fun to share. And it's a very good point that you're pointing out the different duality there.
Yeah. Well, there's a there's a cool story in the Zohar
Mm.
about King Shlomo, King Solomon, where he's described to be like the wisest man alive in the Jewish tradition. And the Zohar kind of tells a story where he would wake up every morning or once a week, I don't remember, and an eagle is this very interesting myth. And he would go on the wings of an eagle and he would fly to the east, all the way to the east of the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it says that he would go there to receive a very specific wisdom that he didn't have. And he would go all the way to the east, and it's actually just like it. I think the way it's worded, like the mountains of the east. And then it says only once he would go there and he would return, then his wisdom would be complete.
Wow.
In other words, he would go there to find a wisdom he didn't have. That was lost in a sense, or I don't know if it was lost or to discover something new.
Yeah.
It's,
I like that a lot.
I mean, I think I would take from that is where there's definitely wisdom everywhere to be taken, and I'm not sure we have it all.
No, I think that's one of the things that keeps me so fascinated with Judaism and Torah is that through the centuries, we've looked around as a people, or what are the best ideas around us. Rambam looked at Aristotle and says, hey, this is what I like about what he said. This is where I disagree. But I want to know what the truth is. There's a really interesting Gemara that says that the Jews were kicked out of Israel and spread around the world to look for converts. So I don't know who said it, but they said, well, if we were doing that, we failed pretty miserably. We got very, very few converts, and no one really wanted to join in mass. But if you think of it in terms of ideas, we did convert a lot of ideas and improve them, enhance them. Spinoza not being exactly someone who stayed in the Jewish fold, but his ideas and his synthesis created secularism. I mean, I think he was the first secular person in the world when he left Judaism. And I'm just thinking about people that weren't necessarily Jewish in terms of their practice, but Einstein, who made all of his scientific discoveries. I mean, there's just a very huge curiosity of Jewish thinkers. Like a better example in terms of religious people, Chovot HaLevavot, Bachi ibn Pakuda. You can clearly see that he's studying Sufi manuals. Or Avraham ben Rambam quotes the Sufis and says, this is what I like about what they do. So I really love that the very most traditional Jewish thinkers looked around the world and said, hey, what's going on out there?
It is, yeah. And I think also Abulafia would he speak a lot about different knowledges and Sufi. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I mean, I think historically he was known to have contacted the Sufis, and he traveled everywhere, and he was almost in exile. And I'm sure he came in contact with yogis and Sufis, and I mean, his is a tremendous synthesis of Rambam, Aristotle, Sufism. Everything that he thought made sense to build in his system. The German Hasidim. So that's why I think I love him so much, is because he was very clear that he was taking the best of the ideas from around the world, but sifting them, I would say, through a Jewish lens or Jewish sifter, and saying, here's what would really make sense with our Jewish spirituality.
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah. Great session.
Okay, fantastic.
We covered a lot. Depth and safah, sufah, and ad and Taoism. That was our big surprise. I'm glad everyone stayed to the end to hear that one.
Taoism, yeah. That's a good one. Fantastic. Okay, so we covered 2 Mishnayot again. And we see in every Mishnah is like, it's such a short thing, but it has so much in it that we like.
It's worlds in there. Just 6. I mean, I could learn this for my whole life and not scratch the surface. It's amazing how much is inside of it.
Right. Exactly.
Such a bracha learning with you, Ephraim.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
Yeah.
And hopefully next week I'll have Abulafia's Pirush. And the week after I will have Ari Caplan in Hebrew. So
the Svarim are pouring in.
Exactly.
So you fly to the States in a week or so for Rosh Hashanah, right? That would make sense. It's coming up that fast.
For the holidays, yeah.
Beautiful.
So next week.
Okay, very good. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy.
Same, very much same.